We're going to start tonight with Mr. Leary coming up and sharing a Dharma talk. And I have to share with you that I got to meet Zach like a year ago, and I was in Mexico in the Sonoran Desert, and I heard that Zach Leary was going to be speaking or was going to be doing a talk. And I just rushed in my car to get back because I'm like a fangirl of Zach. And I rushed in my car to get back, and I got to come and meet him and hear him speak. And it's just so precious because he is such a delightful being and has so much, channeling so much goodness through. And so Zach, I'm so honored to have you here tonight to share with us your magic, your kirtan later on this evening, and your talk here. I know that we're all very honored to have you, so I'd love to welcome you up to share with us.
Under that hat? Wow. Far out. Good to see you, brother. Wow, wow, feedback. In the words of David Gilmour, where would rock and roll be without feedback? Yeah, it's, when I do these kinds of things, I like to look at it as we're just kind of hanging out with each other. So let's not mistake being up here on a stage as anything like a formal presentation of anything. We're just hanging out. But I'm happy to be here. We'll be singing kirtan later with my brother Craig, who's a master tala player, John Bavon, Carly. And I hope you guys will stick around for that as well. And it's been great to connect with Whitney on the vision of the ATMA Church. And we live in an incredible time in that sense. Had you asked me 10 years ago if an entheogenic church could legally form in the state of Texas, I would have said probably not so much. So it's great to see it flourishing. So I thought I just was going to start tonight with a little bit of a story. Ramakrishna is one of the great Indian saints of the 19th century who helped formalize kind of the practice of Vedanta, and the Gospels of Ramakrishna helped to form Vedanta as we know it in the West today. A devotee came to see him and asked, is it possible to see God? He said, yes, certainly. Living in solitude now and then, repeating God's name and singing his glories and discriminating between the real and the unreal, these are the means to employ to see him. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the real and the unreal in just a little bit. The same devotee asked him again, kind of turning the energy a little bit into longing and yearning. Under what conditions does one see God? Ramakrishna replied, cry to the Lord with an intensely yearning heart, and you will certainly see him. People shed a whole jug of tears for wife and children. They swim in tears for money. But who weeps for God? Cry to him with a real cry. Right? So, who weeps for God? I think in the simplest terms, I find that the essence of spiritual practice is the practice of equanimity, of trying to invite in equanimity into your life, cultivate equanimity into your life in a way that is repeatable and usable and accessible on a daily basis, right? A lot of us come into the psychedelic space and deeply wounded, deeply wounded, whether it is a deep traumatic wound or a specific event that happened in life, or a disconnection from your own Dharma, a disconnection from your own self. And perhaps the medicine can sort of course correct that pain temporarily and bring you closer to God, right? And we have so many amazing visions in the medicines that bring us closer to the face of God, right? But when we come out of the medicine, how do we keep that yearning for God alive? In the great holy place of Vrindavan in India, Vrindavan, for those of you who don't know, maybe some of you have been, Vrindavan is the physical place where Lord Krishna and Sri Radharani engaged in their pastimes and their amorous affections, where Krishna danced and spread the divine nature of God. And Radha, his consort, was there to receive him and merged in ecstasy with the dance of God that she became God herself, right? And in Vrindavan, when you greet somebody, you say Radhe, Radhe, Radha, Radha. You don't say Krishna, Krishna. So you say Radhe, Radhe. So you're invoking the person, the being, the human vessel kind of incarnation of the person who is yearning to be with God. The person who's calling out for God's name. The person who is in temporary separation from God, that he, she, or it are yearning to connect with that deep, deep, beautiful, infinitely wise, infinitely aware, infinitely perfect moment of connecting with God. And in that yearning, as Radha and her associates, the gopis, do, you are in that space of connecting with God all the time. So when you're going around Vrindavan, you just say Radhe, Radhe, and it's this beautiful, beautiful energy, and it's kind of a little bit different than we might view God in the West. There was a beautiful living saint who left his body maybe about 10 years or so ago now, something like that. His name was Chota Maharaj. They called him Little Maharaji. He was anywhere from 115 to 140 years old. Truly, not making it up. He was an extraordinary little man. He had this beautiful little ashram just on the Parikram in Vrindavan, just south of Neemkar, Baba's ashram. And I went to see him many, many, many times over the course of about 7 or 8 years. And just trying to picture this very elderly, small little man, dreadlocks down to his feet, who was anywhere from 115 to 140 years old. And you'd go, and his darshan be him patting you on the head. And the last time that I saw him in his body, he walked into his little room at his ashram, and you just hear in the sweetest voice, Jaya Radha Bhagavan ki Jai, Jaya Radha Bhagavan ki Jai, Jaya Radha Bhagavan ki Jai, Jaya Radha Bhagavan ki Jai. As he's patting you on the head, I'm just lost in love. Jaya means hail or victory. Radha, I just told you about. Bhagavan means the ultimate expression, the infinite expression of God, and Ki Jai means like, yay God. And he was just lost in this mantra, just lost in it. And he would pat you on the head, and you would get lost in it with him. And immediately in that moment, it's such a far out thing for, a Westerner, especially Westerners like myself who grew up in urban environments that are really kind of surrounded by the Maya, who are surrounded by the physical manifestations of the Kali Yuga, of greed, envy, ignorance, and things like that. And it was at that moment where I was just kind of transported out of my body and just lost in this mantra, this beautiful, simple expression of what it means to be in Dharma, of what it means to be in that expression of calling out for God. Right? And, granted, my Dharma is not the same as perhaps Chota Maharaj's is, but, that doesn't mean that singular expression, that energy, that transcendental connection of experiencing darshan in that way can't be taken with you everywhere you go. We tend to overly simplify the concept of the Maya in the West. It's referred to as the illusion. Maya means illusion. It's a little bit more than that, though. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. A lot of Sanskrit words Sanskrit's a really far-out language, by the way. And for those of you who haven't dabbled in studying it, I highly recommend it, because it was a language that was really, it wasn't created just as a communication vessel. It was also communicated as an energetic transmission vessel. So a lot of the words or mantras that we use in Sanskrit, Namaste, Om Namah Shivaya, Hare Krishna, Jaya Radha Bhagavan Ki Jai, or anything like that, or the Maya, it's very hard to translate them into English. English is kind of a binary black and white language. So the loosest thing we could sort of associate it to is illusion, right? But the nuance of it is a little bit more far out, because when we take on physical form and incarnate into our bodies and hang out in the material world, like each one of us needs to do in a way that makes sense for each one of you. Each one of us has a unique expression of his or her or their incarnation, right? And that's a cool thing. That's a far out thing, and it's a noble thing to do, right? If you are a good dancer, be a good dancer. If you like cool cars, have a cool car, If you play guitar well, play guitar well. If you play tabla well, play tabla well, Do these things. If you want a nice abode for you and your family to thrive in, that's okay. Where the Maya kind of gets wrapped into that is the false attachment to these things, right? Is the false attachment into thinking that we need these things in order to give us fulfillment, right? There's nothing wrong with playing with them. They're fun to play with, right? We all like shiny objects, right? The Maya is the thinking that you need the shiny object in order to move you along down the path, right? And I think the reason I'm bringing that up, I think it's a very normal reaction to look around the world today and to feel a certain way about it. Whatever way you feel about it might be different than mine or not, but it's a pretty normal reaction to have a strong feeling about what you see in the world today. And I am of the inclination, I guess, the thinking that I don't believe in tuning it out, because the world, our collective consciousness, our connection to one another has gotten a lot smaller, in modern times. 150 years ago, even 100 years ago, what was happening in Palestine, if you lived here, you might not have even heard about it. It was considered like it was on the other side of the world. Maybe that didn't affect me as much these days. So I do find it kind of a necessary exercise to tap into the suffering of my brothers and sisters, no matter where they are, if they're across the street or if they're in Gaza or Israel. Because that tapping into the suffering, it just brings us so close to God. It just brings us right there. It just brings us right into that yearning, that vision, that awareness of imagining a better world, of feeling that in your heart, of feeling that sense of compassion, that sense of understanding, that sense of kind of an evolutionary construct, where if we all just stopped for a second, remembered God, just for a second, that maybe the world might be different, right? But the Maya is so strong, it's so seductive. It's so seductive. And it's so easy for us to get pulled away from that. You know, it's such an easy thing to do. But again, you know, the reason I mention that, because like I'm kind of going to contradict myself a little bit here, is that it's both important to tune into the suffering of our brothers and sisters. It's important in the sense that we can tune into those frequencies so we can learn how to serve humanity better and to understand humanity better. And in some ways, it's not unimportant, but it's just the cosmic dance. It's just the cosmic dance, you know, the imperfections, the order of chaos, shadow, light, order, chaos, sadness, love, destruction, rebuilding. You know, they've always been part of the human experiment, right? And so I like to keep a foot in kind of both sides of that dance, you know, and understanding that there's a real need to address the suffering in the world. But on the other hand, it's a difficult exercise to tap into, but that everything is the perfect expression of God, you know, all of it. And that these things do have a way of kind of, I'm not saying, this isn't a political diatribe where I'm trying to, you know, juxtapose this against peace in the Middle East or anything like that. Far more complicated. But I do believe that the energies around it are kind of this perfect expression of the dance, you know, as Ram Dass would say, the only dance there is, right? You know, and I also like turning to that too, because, and this is kind of a great intersection of, I think, one of the many reasons why the modern psychedelic renaissance has flourished the way that it has, goes back to the first noble truth of the Buddha, you know, suffering, right? The Buddha's first noble truth is suffering, is that to understand the human condition in order to progress on the path of enlightenment, you must acknowledge that suffering is rooted in every single one of us. It doesn't matter what class, caste, race, sexual identity, or whatever you have, suffering, old age, disease, and death. None of us can escape it, right? Greed, the need for more, all of these things, right? And it's an interesting parallel because, you know, when I grew up in the psychedelic community, the notion of taking your suffering into the medicine, that really wasn't a thing. You know, we weren't really talking about that as much as we are today. I mean, we were definitely talking about taking the medicine and getting closer to God, but we weren't talking about deliberately bringing our suffering into the plant teacher and having the plant teacher or the synthetic spirit molecule teacher give us that cosmic mirror back as a mirror, as a way for us to look at our suffering. It's kind of a new thing. But I think it's a really cool thing. I think it's a really, really cool thing because it's expanded our worldview, both interpersonally and extrapersonally, around the degrees of suffering, the degrees of trauma, the degrees of, and subsequently, if you go full circle, degrees of compassion, right? If we're able to hold each other in the arms of, you know, a sacred ritual and these very heartfelt intentions of, hey, brother, sister, I'll be there for you as you look at your suffering, you know. I'll be there for you to hold your hand as you look at your suffering. And whatever your suffering is yours. It's yours and it's yours alone. And I think that is a really beautiful byproduct of the modern psychedelic movement. That's not to say that we still can't have a lot of fun and sing and dance around the fire and play music and dance and celebrate and do other great things as well. But it's been a tremendous joy to watch the rewriting of what it means to acknowledge someone else's suffering in the material world today. We loosely call it trauma. If you go back, it's for those of you who are in the field, if you go back and say, look at the DSM-3 or even 4, and look at the definition of trauma and see what it is, and you'll be amazed at how very small and binary it is, And we've really opened up our heart space to allow so many more versions of what it means to turn suffering into a path of fulfillment. And what a beautiful way, I think, to tap into the spirit of what I was talking about with Ramakrishna earlier, the real versus the unreal, and being able to see God in everything. Another little Ramakrishna thing, Ramakrishna is a Vedantic Hindu saint, from the yogic Hindu tradition. And if those of you who have been to Hindu temples know that they're very ornate, there's lots of deities around, and altars and flowers and things like that. And it's kind of a cool scene, I like it. But if you go to a Vedanta temple, there are no deities in them. Not a single one. There's a picture of Ramakrishna up on the altar, and that is it. Ramakrishna woke up one day and told all his devotees, get them all out, take all the deities out, take all the pictures out, take all the murtis, the statues out, take them all away. We have to see God in everything. We have to see God in everything. And it's the only Hindu temple and lineage of its kind that does that. And it's kind of an extraordinary expression. Again, those of you who've been to temples like that know it's very deity focused, And I just love that. And I think it's a beautiful, beautiful reminder for us to come full circle into what is real, what is not real, what is God, what isn't God, what is suffering, what is healing, what is joy, what is awareness, what do we all have to work on both individually and collectively, and where can we meet in the spirit of love to help us find fulfillment, help us find joy, help us find just a little fabric, a little crumb, just polishing just a little dust off of our hearts, to get us closer to the divine. So I'm going to ask you all just to close your eyes just for a minute, sit in any position that you want that is a comfortable, reflective, meditative position for you. We all just arrived here. The dust of our day, the dust of travel, the dust of traffic, the dust of wondering what's for dinner. Just let that all kind of fall away for a moment and just be here and find your breath and sort of invite in a relaxed alertness to your body. Feeling where you're comfortable, feeling where you're tense. And as you breathe and feel the breath kind of going up through your feet, up your legs, into your chest, into your heart, noticing where you're tense, and just letting that go. As you take a few cycles of breath around that, try to expel anything that is keeping you disconnected from your most authentic self. In this moment, if you're feeling sad, it's okay to be sad. But just let it just kind of hang out in the back for a little bit. If you're feeling in pain, just let that hang out in the back for a little bit. And just start inviting in kind of that vision of yourself on the horizon, surrounded by a golden sun of light and love. And again, expel through your breath anything that is keeping you disconnected from that version of self. Jaya Radha Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jaya Radha Bhagavan Ki Jai. Now over your next few inhales, start expelling anything that is keeping you disconnected from the community in this room. As we gather together in community, feel the connection, the kinship, the solidarity, the vibrational frequency of the others in the room. And what's keeping you disconnected from truly tuning into others in this community at this moment? And slowly start envisioning. You don't really have to call faces to it. There are quite a few people, but just envisioning a picture of the room, of others in the room on the horizon, surrounded by light. What's keeping you disconnected from each other right now? And let that just fall away. And it's okay if you're feeling any anxiety or sadness or pain. You can still hang out with it, but just let it slip away for just a moment. Hang out with it later. Jaya Radha Bhagavan Ki Jai. And now as you take your next few breaths and really feel them traverse across your entire vessel, your entire physical manifestation, turning that vision of community and connection to community, start to expel anything that is keeping you from being connected to God. So yeah, we're doing this in 3 parts: self, community, and God. Whatever he, she, it is that you want to call God, what's keeping you disconnected from that? If your vision of God is formless, has no form, it's just a frequency, tune into that. If you resonate with physical archetypes of Godhead, Krishna, Durga, Kali, Allah, Buddha, Jesus, Abraham, the Virgin Mary, it doesn't matter. Bhagavan, one God, 1,000 masks, just tune into that frequency. Doesn't matter if it's formless or if it has form. Just invite in that space. Jaya Radha Bhagavan Ki Jaya. So I think exercises like that, visualization, meditations, are beautiful tools that you can take with you, no matter where you are. And for me, they've really been taking me into the thinking around fulfillment versus accomplishment. In the West, we're so fixated on accomplishment. And instead, I kind of just maybe inviting you to consider the path of fulfillment. Just as an idea to play with. Because fulfillment invites us into contentness, invites us into equanimity for accepting things as they are, not as you want them to be. And fulfillment gives us all we need and all we want, no matter what stage of the path we're on. As the Buddha said to the ditch digger, as the ditch digger said to the Buddha, "But Buddha, I'm just a ditch digger. What do I have to offer the world?" And the Buddha said, "Be the absolute best ditch digger that you can be. Your role is important. Be the best ditch digger that you can be." And take that into your meditation. So I think the path of fulfillment really keeps us in the here and now and not focused on the constant movable goal. I mean, it's great to strive for things and to set goals and to achieve them. Of course it is. But it can also be a trap of constantly moving the line down the field over and over and over and over and over again.